There is news this morning in a case you will be watching. The father accused of leaving his son to die in a hot car will face a trial, indicted on 8 charges, including malice murder, that's the highest form of homicide available, and cruelty to children. And in an unusual twist, there's an unrelated charge of sexting with a minor. The key there, the sexting was done while the child was in that hot car. Justin Ross Harris was arrested in June after his 22-month-old son, Cooper, died after being left in a hot car for 7 hours. Harris says he simply forgot his son was in the car. Prosecution refutes that, accusing Harris of searching for information about hot car deaths. But there are developments on both sides of this case, unusual things that we need to get to. Sunny Hostin, CNN legal analyst and former federal prosecutor, and Paige Pate, constitutional and criminal defense attorney. Thanks to both for being here. Let's start with the charges. Using multiple different homicide charges, death by a person, not unusual.
That isn't unusual. I think, though, Chris, what is unusual for me, at least in this case, is the malice murder. I mean, we know that in Georgia that opens him up to the death penalty. And the judge in the probable cause hearing sort of indicated, listen, this is serious enough that this could be a death penalty case. So I think we all knew that that was the possibility. But the prosecution has placed such a heavy burden on the team because they've got to prove, if they can prove that he premeditated this. And I think it's going to be really, really difficult to find a juror, quite frankly, or jury, that's going to be able to get over the hump that a father would not only kill his child, but intend to kill his child in that way. I mean, who has ever heard of murder by hot car?
Well, banking on emotion, right, Paige Pate? There, prosecutors are banking that when a jury hears, many of them will be parents, I'm sure, you won't be able to keep parents off the jury, that not only did you kill your kid, which has to be stupid at a minimum, but you were sexting at the same time. What role might that play?
Oh, I think it's going to be a huge role in this case because that's exactly what the prosecution needs to do to get a conviction on malice murder and to even consider the death penalty. They have to hit the jurors viscerally, and that's exactly what this sexting evidence is going to do. Now, I think they added those charges to this indictment simply because they wanted to make sure that the judge would allow them to introduce that evidence at the trial. If those charges were not in this indictment, then I don't think it would be relevant to the underlying murder.
Can you sever the charges? There's something you can do in the law where you say, hey, this has nothing to do, the sexting has nothing to do with this homicide case. Let's split that and deal with that another day. You think the defense will be successful here, Sonny?
I think the defense is going to try that. Any good defense attorney will, but I don't think that's going to be successful because this all arises out of the same act, and so that's not going to work. But let me say this about the sexting charge, which I think true, tactically, strategically brilliant, because you do want to be able to kind of attack the character of the defendant, and that's the back way door of doing that.
And remind you at home, you can't introduce character of bad evidence unless the defendant brings up their good character, which is rare. So that's a legal thing, but you need to know it, and that's why this is so smart.
Right. So it's smart, so they get that in. But I think it cuts both ways, and I've said this all along. In this day and age, there aren't going to be that many jurors that haven't surfed the internet, found sort of pornographic images, and don't understand, I think, sort of the addiction to sexting. And so there could be a couple of jurors that get on that jury and say, well, yeah, he was sexting, but maybe that is why he forgot his kid was there. Maybe that is why he was so obsessed with this sexting that it's not possible that he intended to kill his child that way. I mean, if he did do this intentionally, then he's the worst of the worst, right? And I think, again, the sexting could lead some jurors to think, well, he's just like every other person that has done that.
Paige, you're shaking your head.
Well, right. I mean, if that's right, and the jury does look at it that way, and Sonny's correct, then they still get him on felony murder, because then he's criminally negligent for leaving his child in the hot car, and that is enough for an underlying felony to convict him of felony murder, which still carries life in prison. So it's a similar charge.
Now, what's the big hit on the prosecution side? The big hit for them is that cop that they put on in the preliminary hearing makes that videotape like something that it may not stand up to scrutiny about. And what am I saying? That's vague. They make assertions. Oh, boy, he went back to that car and he looked in and he saw that his kid was there. And when he was walking away, he saw this guy and he was very nervous. And Then you watch the tape, and it seems as though those assertions are pushing it a little bit, Sonny. You
I
were a
think-
prosecutor. Shouldn't they have known better than put a cop on that could be debunked?
Well, no, because during a probable cause hearing, you just have to prove just enough. And so when you're a prosecutor, Chris, you just put on just enough to get past that hurdle.
But
and
they
then
didn't.
You go.
They went way too far, Paige. And now, as the defense attorney, I say, hey, you had that cop on there who said, I spent all this time with the car. It's like a flash. You had this cop on there who said, I took all this time getting out of the car. It was a flash.
That doesn't bother me, but I will tell you this. Since they charged it this way, since they got the indictment this way, we don't know what those grand jurors heard to vote for that indictment. There must be something more. There must be something we haven't heard about that points to
Now,
premeditation.
how many times, Paige Pate, have we heard that, maybe even from Sonny, about how there must be something
True.
more that they have, and then they don't? What's your
Well,
you know?
I actually agree with Sonny. I think there is something
Wow.
more that the
It's my
grand
morning.
jurors heard. But let me tell you this, though. Just like the probable cause hearing, the grand jurors only heard from this detective. There was no defense evidence. There was no opportunity to cross-examine him. All that's going to change at a trial when they have to withstand what I assume is going to be very aggressive cross-examination on the video and other aspects of the case.
Paige Pate, Sonny Hostins, thank you so much.
Thanks.
This is just
Thank
the
you.
beginning.
Oh, definitely. We're going to hear a lot more about this case.
Oh, yeah. It's good to understand where it starts. It makes sense as we go.